We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read. Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I.JOE comics podcast. And today I will be talking to special guest writer Paul Jenkins. And without much further ado and too much preamble, I'll just add him to the stage. Hi, Paul. Right. How are you?
I'm right. I'm excited to be here. Happy to chat a little bit about G.I. Joe and other things.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And often before we get into the things, we often like to talk around our surroundings. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are and what we can see in your background?
Oh, this stuff? Let's see. The Crow. Let's see. The Crow over there is like a sort of short film that I directed. They were very lovely, and they gave me that little crow thing. It was about the Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, actually. Uh-huh. This cat is the cat from American McGee's Alice, which is pretty fantastic. I've got a million toys back here, like millions of them. I've got like a Welsh Corgi, of course. And then on the other one over here, you'll find a lot of characters that I've created. So I didn't create the Ninja Turtles, obviously, but we got the little Ninja Turtles up there. There's a Darkling from the Darkness video game. There's Red Riding Hood and the Wolf from Fairy Quest. The Sentry's at the back. Wolverine Origin at the back. And there is a fantastic item. You see that thing that I'm pointing to right there?
Yeah, I can't tell what it is from here, but I can see a little thing.
I'll bring up the camera in a minute, because if we're going to kick this thing off with a bang, this is comedy classic, right? So my wife is a lovely girl. She's a little bit nutty. We call her Nigh Perfect. And Nigh Perfect, as you know, I've written about her many times over the years. And Nigh Perfect, a few years ago, it was Father's Day. And I was coming home from the TV studio, the film studio I was working in, and I had to type really late at night. And just as it was Father's Day, she's standing there and she's got this thing behind her back. And it's actually a candle, right? I won't show you what's drawn on the candle. So what she found out was that you could heat sink. You could actually put a digital photograph on wax paper, and then if you heated it, it would transfer to a white candle. And it was the 100th anniversary of one of the deaths of my great-grandfathers in the first war. So she's all teary because she knows I've been working hard. And she said, "We love you very much, and I just wanted to give you something. It's a picture of your great-grandfather on a candle. This is one of the items that if my house was burning down, I'd run in and I would save this thing." And I said, "Sweetheart, that's great. It's lovely. There's only two problems. Number one, that's not my great-grandfather. Number two, that's Adolf Hitler." She made me an accidental Hitler candle, which I think is the most fantastic thing of all time. So there you go.
Yeah.
I don't know. This pretty much sums up my family life at this point.
Yeah. I love this thing. I will never be able to use it for the purpose that it was intended to be used, which is a candle.
No, it's just the funniest thing ever. It's such an epitome of my wife. You know, she accidentally made me a Hitler cat. She tried to get it back. I'm like, "You're never having this back. This is my favorite thing ever." So, you know. And
you're joining us from coaching, which I guess is the top that you're wearing is.
No, that's because it's Saturday and I'm a giant Crystal Palace fan.
Oh, right, crikey, Crystal Palace crumbs. Interviews cancelled. Right.
Well, I mean that's fine, except that we are the winner of the last two major trophies. We'll take them.
Very good, very good. So, my blurb for about you, my guest, Paul Jenkins, born December 1965. You grew up in the UK, in the Westcountry, before moving to the States and getting started in comics with Mirage, working with the creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at the wee age of 22. You're well known for working in comics, Hellblazer at DC, the Sentry, Inhumans, Wolverine Origins, and more besides at Marvel. You're the founder, chief creative officer of Weta Studios, a cross-media development and production house based where you are in Atlanta, Georgia, maker of hats. But more important than anything else, you wrote G.I. Joe Frontline issues number 17, Training Day, a beachhead solo story in November 2003, and G.I. Joe Cobra Reborn from Devil's Due in January 2004. I think probably you'll agree, putting everything else into the shade.
My greatest accomplishment, Mark.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. So where should we start? What about your childhood? Growing up, you sort of got started a little bit before me. So growing up in the UK, I guess you didn't grow up with G.I. Joe, the 3 3/4 inch guys, but maybe you saw Action Man.
We had Action Man. Action Man had a couple of different versions, right? There'd be Action Man, which was G.I. Joe, right? And Action Man would also have an eagle eye, where you could look through the back of his head and he'd have like one eagle eye that you could look through. And then there would be, and he had gripping hands, right? Mm-hmm. I did not have, I was raised by a single mum in the countryside. We've got family in South London, and hence my accent, right? It's half South London and half all right. I sound like I drove a combine harvester.
Half all right and half all right.
Right. Yeah. Right. I got two different accents competing, and they've been making me into two different people. That's why I wrote The Sentry and The Void. I've been those two people my whole life. I won't tell you which is from where. But when I was about 9, it's probably about 9 or 10, and I did get an Action Man. I got an Action Man, and I really wanted one, and he had gripping hands, right? Mm-hmm. And all I would do would chuck him up in the tree and let him fall through the branches. Every so often he'd catch himself by the hand, and I thought this was the greatest thing. I'd sit there for hours just chucking him up in the tree, letting him fall through the branches and seeing if he could hang on. It was great. I just amused myself for hours with Action Man, because he couldn't see anything through his eagle eye. Couldn't see anything.
So that's your G.I. Joe origins, and your comic origins. Did you grow up reading, I guess, British comics, or trying to get your hands on some of the slightly more elusive American comics?
Yeah, no, it's no overstatement to say that we really did grow up very, very poor, right? So we just lived out. We had, I think I had one copy of Journey into Unknown Worlds that was like a Marvel reprint from the 50s. I had one copy of Uncanny Tales. My grandmother would sometimes send us some comics from London that would have like a Daredevil comic or a maybe Fantastic Four comic in or something. Mm-hmm. But usually we grew up with British comics. So you got the Daily Digest comics. But then I was there. I knew that 2000 AD was coming out, and I was really excited. And when that came out, the other thing that we get in British comics, and Garth Ennis, I think, probably speak to this, is that we got a lot of these like digest size, they're about this big, little digest size war books called Commando and all this, and it was heroic tales of soldiers that would kill 10,000 Germans with one burst of their Tommy gun, But when 2000 AD came out, I was so excited. That and a book called Action Comics, which was actually really. It had like a shark called Hookjaw. It was like a shark with a hook in its jaw, right? Those comics were really well written and really well drawn. They were really thought-provoking because Alan Moore was writing them, Those things were fantastic. And so I kind of got shaped creatively by reading that type of comic, much more so than American comics. And people have often said to me, why is it that British writers tend to do okay with American comics, like myself and Garth, Alan, and other people, and I always think it's probably because we're not so reverent about we're not scared of American comics, so we can actually write something interesting. And funnily enough, I think what I did with the Cobra Commander story probably speaks to that.
Yeah, not afraid to break a few things or. Yeah. What was the trajectory that took you across to America to start in comics there? My childhood, my home life wasn't easy, right? My mum was a single mum
And when I was 11 years old, I was doing really well in school, but I think I was about to go one of two ways, you know. And I was either going to be a really clever criminal, or I was going to be clever something else, you know. And I think a couple of my teachers had seen that, you know, we had a potential, and so they had me do a common entrance exam to a very well-known school called Christ Hospital, which is like the Blue Coat School. It was founded in 1553 by Edward VI, and the foundation of the school came about because Edward VI had a body double who you know, a kid that he selected that would literally go into the rooms first to be stabbed or eat the food first, you know, to die. And he was very grateful to this kid, and he supposedly chartered the school. By the time I went, there weren't very many full fee payers. There were not very many scholarships, but I won a scholarship to the school. So I moved away from my home when I was 11, and I actually never really went back.
This was when you were 11. You boarded at Christ
Hospital, yeah. And then when there would be like the end of term or something, I would just go to places. I'd sometimes see my mum. I'd go to my grandparents. I'd go stay with friends. I just didn't live anywhere really, you know.
Wow.
So I was very, very independent, and I went to go to college to study to be an actor, but I didn't really like it. So I spent a lot more of my time in film school, and I studied music. I like playing in a band, and I really cared about music. So I came to America teaching music and drama to learning disabled children, and I ended up staying. I was lucky enough. I was up in the Northeast. I was playing with a band, and a couple of guys from nearby had done an album cover for my band, and they had this comic book that they worked on called the Ninja Turtles. And I met Kevin and Pete a bit, but I knew some of the other artists that were around there. And one day I broke my leg playing football, and I said, I can't play with a band. We can't tour. I'm waiting on tables, but even that's really hard with a broken leg. You guys need any help? And they went, yeah, we'd love to have you help us. So I came in, I was the third employee. Wow. There was an office manager and a guy that did licensing and me. And they had me start on editing and producing the books. Next thing I know, I move over with Kevin. I do that for a couple of years. Then I move over to Tundra Publishing. It's this massive publishing house. That's where I met Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and all these people that were like at the top of their game. So now I'm Alan's editor, you know, and I got to know him. He's a great guy. But I got to know plenty of people that were really, really great creators in those days. And essentially they, you know, I had done it for a few years, and then I was editor-in-chief of a company called Majestic, and I was actually in Britain talking to Alan, asking him if he wanted to come work with Majestic, which he didn't. But I told him, I don't know, man, you know, Alan, every time I see the work that you do, I always think you put effort into it. You care about what you do. And I don't see that in the early 90s comics I'm looking at. I just feel like they're just put out. Mm-hmm. I feel like I should try to do it myself, you know. And he said, I think you should give it a shot. So I went to San Diego that year, and it would be 1993, I think. And I met Lou Stathis, the other editor of Hellblazer. That Eddie Campbell had done a couple of issues of Hellblazer and wasn't interested in doing any more. I don't think it was a very good fit. So they needed a writer, and I said, would you consider me? And I'd never written anything. And he said yes, and so I wrote it, and they have all the people that tried out, established comic pros and everything, they picked me. And 6 weeks after I asked him, they called me up and went, congratulations, you're the new writer of Hellblazer. And I went, okay.
Wow. So did you do like a trial script to kind of pass the test and get the permanent gig?
Yeah, I wrote a first script, and it was formatted incorrectly. It was all wrong. And Lou said, I need you to do it a bit differently. So I did. I think they put me through my paces for 6 weeks with that script to see if I could take direction, take editing. I met the perfect person. Lou Stathis was the perfect editor for me. He was a musician guy. He was a former music journalist, I think. He was a punk like me, right? And so we were just the right people to me, and he gave me this chance. And I will always say, of course, Karen Berger gave me the same chance as well, the editor-in-chief. So look at that. You know, I suddenly show up as from nowhere, and I'm writing Hellblazer. And it is a really prestigious book that everybody wants to write. And I'm writing Hellblazer. What is going on? Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too far on from Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon's run, was it? And that's
No, it was right after God. Yeah, I took over from Garth basically.
So here's the prop that I had, which is, try and not get too much glare.
Oh my word! That's
this is Sean Phillips on the bottom of this backing board, and then this amazing piece of art on the top. I believe is
you've persuaded me to do some art. So I remember that one. I think it's one of the few ones that I've ever done. That one's actually probably the least bad piece of art I've ever done for somebody. So,
wow,
great.
So that was from UCAC, UK Comic Art Convention. Does it stand for? I don't know. 1994-ish thereabouts. So sort of all of these years on. So from Hellblazer, sort of progressing on to a number of other, very prestigious, sort of well-remembered titles like the Sentry, Origin, telling the origin of Wolverine, Inhumans as one of those breakout Marvel Knights title, which sort of reset Marvel as we know it, really. And also various other long runs, such as on Peter Parker, Spider-Man. So, sort of going great guns. And Origins is an interesting one because in terms of the G.I. Joe story, or the oral history as Josh Blaylock tells it, when Origins #1 came out, which I think was September 2001, Devil Jew relaunched with G.I. Joe issue #1, which did very well. And as Josh Blaylock tells the story, he would have had the most successful issue of the month had it not been for you and Origin. So you're sort of part of the origin story of G.I. Joe for Devil's Due as well.
Right.
So I think that put a sort of was a memorable thing for Josh, which he's may have been part of the story as to how you ended up on G.I. Joe a little bit later. So a couple of years on from the launch of the Devil's Due initial comic in 2001, in 2003 was your first writing for G.I. Joe with Frontline issue 17, which was that called Training Day. It's a Beachhead solo issue.
Yeah.
Can you remember how it was that you got this particular gig?
Yeah. Josh called me actually. In those days, I was quite a hot commodity in terms of people wanting me to kind of write for them. Top Cow wanted me to do it, and I worked with them a bit, and a lot of different people were after me to kind of do it because I think I had gone from. I think if you just put like things in context, when Jay Lee and I did the Inhumans, we were on this like rocket ship, right? Mm-hmm. Because the 4 Marvel Knights books that really I think changed the trajectory of Marvel as a company, right? Those 4 books really changed the trajectory. And Inhumans was one, and it won an Eisner Award. They hadn't won one in a long time. Daredevil was written by Kevin Smith. It sold gangbusters.
Yeah.
People don't seem to remember that Black Panther went for 50 issues. Now, in those days, if you had taken that title, Black Panther, you would have said, no way, but it went great. Chris Priest is a great writer. They did 50 issues. Yeah. And the only one that didn't quite work was Punisher at the time. It just didn't find its audience. It wasn't maybe the take. But Joe and Joe Quesada, Jimmy Palmiotti were the editors, and so they had proven that these characters did work. But I did a really different thing, right? I was writing like, I was doing a lot of literate kind of comparisons, and this whole thing had a real meat behind it, And I don't think Marvel were used to doing that. So now suddenly they let me do the Sentry, they give me the Wolverine Origin, and so I've got this established kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the bit that people don't realize is that when I went on to Spider-Man, that became like a cash cow. They were struggling with Spider-Man even in those days. They were struggling with the Hulk, right? The Hulk was really in bad strait. And so I came on sales run up. We were doing okay. And so a lot of people wanted me to do this. And I'd known Josh a bit around, and he said, look, what do you know about G.I. Joe? And the answer was, what, you mean Action Man? You know?
Well, you chuck
Not
them
a
in the
lot.
tree and
Yeah, you chuck it. Yeah, you throw them all up in a tree and see what shakes out. Right? Not a lot, but that is my superpower. That I don't know a lot about these characters. I can easily research them, find out who they are, because I always feel that it means I can bring a different voice to a project. Right? I'm the person that can bring a new way of thinking. And if you look at Inhumans, that's exactly what I did. I'll kind of anecdotally tell you, for example, that there's a character in Inhumans called Karnak, the Shatterer, and he can grab like a cup like this, and he can find the bit where it's the weakest, and he can press it, and then the cup will shatter, right? And I'd written him as an advisor to the king, looking at all the flaws in Inhuman society, and everybody was like, "Wow, that's a great way of looking at it." It's because, I didn't care because I wasn't really reverent to the original Inhumans. And it was the same way with anything I did, and it was going to prove to be the same way with G.I. Joe. If I wanted to write a story, the first one that I wrote with Beachhead was actually about my dad's RSM and my flight sergeant when I was an RAF cadet. Both of them were absolute ball busters, right? My dad's sergeant major was the guy, had the turned up moustache, right? And they're brilliant, and the right ones are brilliant and funny and awful and scary, but they are people that can bring in such respect. So I don't approach things from like, I want to do an action story with G.I. Joe stuff and stuff blowing up. I want to write something. I mean, what I was becoming known for was writing things that mean something. And even in the case of writing a story about Beachhead, the first one, it was a character that is this like legendary kind of, he's kind of like an RSM, right? He certainly was in my story, and that's the way that I wanted to do it. This guy was competent, and he was putting people through their paces, and the respect that he commands from it is a story that has a theme now. I've always said there's love for your parents, love for your children, love for your animals, love for your friends, all that. And the love for the people that you serve with is like no other love in the world. You ask anybody in the military, you love those people because they're the only people that shared that experience with you, right? And maybe getting through basic training or went out to, on a tour somewhere. So I could just apply that. I didn't really have to care about whether or not it was particularly canon at the time. I could just go write a story that, and Josh said, I remember this much. Josh said, "Who do you want to write about?" I said, "I don't know any of them." And he went, "Well, Beachhead?" And I said, "Yeah, just say a name."
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. I remember that at one point I had said in the script that that there's a training exercise where one trainee's digging the hole, and the trainees coming behind them are filling the hole in. So they're digging holes and they're getting them filled in. They're digging holes, and it was literally a practical joke that you get in the Air Force. Right, so it is like got some background in military, and I thought that that's the whole point of writing a G.I. Joe comic,
Yeah, I mean, and the sort of the cast of G.I. Joe is so vast, sort of, driven by the fact that they've, they're making the toys and they wanted to create new characters, new toys to sell the toys, and then they're part of part of the canon to have in the storytelling, and so many, and because of the sort of the talents of the people designing the look of the characters, and the talents of Larry Hama writing the dossiers and stuff, and fleshing out a character to go alongside the visual, it means that there's so much there to work with. But also because of the volume of characters, they're often quite untapped as well. So Beachhead is a great example of that. That in terms of comics, probably up to this point, I doubt that any other writer had got much chance to do an awful lot with him at all, despite that potential.
Right. I mean, they all have, every character has potential, right? Every single character you'll ever find. Pick a supervillain, pick a minor character in comics, pick an X-Men, one of the X-Men, just pick one that's weird. You can still write a fantastic story about them, because what you have to do is you've got to work out the why of your story. Why am I writing this story? pick a theme, know what you're writing about. You can always write about that. So it doesn't, I didn't need Beachhead or Cobra Commander or any of these other characters, I didn't need them I didn't need to say, I want to do this character or that character. It didn't make any difference to me. I could have written any of those characters because I think there's something to say with all of them.
Absolutely. So after dipping your toe in with Beachhead, you then return. So it's only a few months later, in terms of the release date, that Cobra Reborn comes out. So, and I think the ambition for Cobra Reborn leading through into G.I. Joe Reloaded continuity was, I think, the hope of Josh Blaylock and Devil's Due would be that this would be a grand new, splash, much like Marvel Knights or the Ultimate Universe, that they could create this new continuity, which would then be the thing that really takes off and becomes the new exciting thing, and they can, and the established universe almost becomes a little bit secondary. So I think they had grand ideals and ambitions, and this initial book out the gate was really well received and very bold in terms of what it accomplished in just a single issue, in terms of setting up the entirety of the Cobra organization and a lot of the sort of the leadership joining together and unveiling grand plans. What was the trajectory from talking initially about just doing one Frontline issue to then creating this opening salvo for this new continuity?
Yeah, I think. Okay, so a couple of things were happening behind the scenes, I think. Number one, Wolverine Origin had now proven to be a massive success, right? So we had taken Wolverine. For 35 years, he'd been walking around scratching his head saying, I don't remember where I came from. And I thought that was boring, right? Like, come on. Why can't you say, well, this is where he was born? Because by answering 2 or 3 questions, you'll raise 1,000 more. And that's what they did. They did Wolverine Origins for 10 years after that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. So it was to Marvel's credit that they said yes to me about doing Wolverine Origin. I think that good for them. Right. Because, I'll sort of encapsulate the story really. Essentially, I was at a Marvel retreat, and it was Joe Quesada's first one as editor-in-chief. And I was just pretty vocal with Bill Jemas, the president, like, you guys are the house of ideas, but you say no to every good idea. It's exhausting to watch. Because I don't care. Right? I don't just do comics. Comics are one of the things I do creatively in my life, and so I don't really feel like I should be an insider or an outsider to comics, right? I was saying, Bill, what I thought, So because of that experience, Josh Blaylock kind of said to me, look, if you were given the freedom that I gave you on Beachhead, what would you do? He told me about the Reborn kind of initiative, in a sense. And I said, Josh, the thing probably that occurs to me is this. When you're doing a Reborn or re-pushing an initiative, I don't care to put it in my mold, right? Like, that's actually why Spider-Man and the Hulk were breaking when I took over in Marvel, because they had brought John Byrne in, and John seemed to want to make it John Byrne's version of the Hulk and John Byrne's version of Spider-Man. It didn't work, right? There's already a version that people love and care about. And so they brought me in to kind of fix that damage, yeah? So I don't need to fix anything with Cobra Commander. I don't need to fix anything with him, right? I need to do the thing that I'm always allowed to do that seems to work out, which is, if I was upset, if I wanted to build this organization and so on and so forth, where would it come from? And it's really weird, because if you think about it, we are watching it in the United States of America at the moment, right? You're watching a lot of really disaffected people being split up, people being angry towards each other, politics getting in the way, people's, this was obviously pre-internet, this book, but people's whole identities are wrapped up in politics and anger and frustration and, having a cause and making their personal identity tied to a thing. So I told Josh, look, I'll tell you what, I'll do this. I'd like to do this book, but I want you to let me say something with it, right? I think that if you write a villain to just be a villain, then they're boring and they never work out, right? You got to believe that villain. That villain has to believe what they're doing. And you could almost agree with them, but you just can't agree with their methods, right? But if you could maybe see something in it. So I was allowed to write the story, and for a while, I'm not sure how it is now, but for a while, that story was kind of canon, apparently. That they loved that story, or somebody loved it. And so the origin that we did was very much the origin of Cobra Commander. I'm not sure where they had the origin before me, but I felt that, I'll tell you this, Mark, I reread it 2 or 3 years ago, because I don't really reread my stuff very much. And I read it and went, that wasn't a bad book. Man, I would follow that guy. His speech that he gives in the book, I remember it. I remember his speech being this. America, we're setting it in America, right? America is founded on the idea that people are supposed to be able to have representation, right? And why were the Americans upset, the colonials at the time, why were they upset with the British Army? Because they had taxation, but they weren't represented. Taxation without representation. So here's this guy, he's got a car dealership, and as his wife leaves him in a thing that he thinks is really unfair, the government are taxing him, and he's like, I've got no representation in this. I've not done anything wrong, right? I just want my business and my life to work, but now it's being taken apart, and I've done nothing wrong. We fought for representation if we were going to be taxed, and I don't feel like we're being represented, and it fuels him to go off and make this entire thing, right? I mean, I agree with him, Left you speechless, didn't I?
Yeah, perhaps not to the extent of quite the actions that he takes, but in terms of the little guy being frustrated at the world that he's encountering and the unfairness of it, I think that's something.
The whole point was that you agree with what he says, but you don't agree with his methods, right?
Yeah. And there's it's a more nuanced take than a sort of a 2-dimensional screaming a character in a cartoon, for example. Right. And I think what helps the story is that it's not too massive a deviation from kind of what we're used to from the Hammer comics in terms of the origins of the character, but it's kind of whereas there are kind of hints and glimpses sort of over a long, a very long run, as it was from Hammer there about his background. We sort of see a much more concentrated version of that, and none of the characterization of the Cobra Commander or the surrounding characters are kind of at odds, counter purposes with kind of what we would expect as the core of those characters, which I think is sometimes where a reinvention or a relaunch might go wrong, that the characters just doesn't, there's something about it that feels off, that they're not quite behaving the way that we might expect.
Yeah, and I think I said that at the beginning of when I was talking about this, right? That like I didn't want to come in and change it. I didn't want to come in and make it and break it and do it differently. There's no point. I just wanted to find thematically what I thought the Cobra Commander was about and say that. And I was given free license to do so. And like I said, I've looked back at my own writing, and, often when you're a writer professionally and you provide a lot of creative work, you don't I don't read my stuff very often, and I don't look at it for at least 2 years after it's been published. Right. But looking back at it and reading it, I went, yeah, I kind of hit it right with that particular issue, because I really think that the idea that a guy would say, I'm not represented for what I've done fairly, right? Now, he might be disaffected and he might have really bad methods and he might be getting an army together and try to take over the world. And I get all of that, right? That's not what the point is. The point is that he feels morally and ethically justified in doing so because he doesn't feel that the ordinary people are being represented by the government, right? It's very prescient if you consider the way the American politics is right now. There's plenty of people that feel that way,
Yeah, absolutely, and and hopefully it doesn't lead to a Cobra Commander at the end of it. But
Yeah.
it seems to be possibly less and less surprising if we do get one.
Yeah.
But there we go. We were talking about the sort of the origins of Cobra Commander and his story, and sort of being a sort of a used car salesman, etc. Did you go back and read the Harmer issue as part of your preparation for that? Do you remember, or was it?
I actually intentionally did not. No.
Okay.
I love Larry. Right. I see Larry. I spent hours with Larry last time he was here at DragonCon, not this last year, but the year before. He's a fantastic guy. And a great writer and a legendary writer for G.I.JOE, certainly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to break anything that Larry might have done, but I did not read it, just in the same way that I did not read the Inhumans before I wrote the 12-issue maxi series. I got 2 5-page stories by Jack Kirby, and I read those and went, that's it, that's all I need. I need to kind of know what they are. I wanted to make sure I didn't do anything that would just go outside of established continuity. I didn't want to just, change him completely. I really didn't want to do that, right? But I don't feel the need to read a bunch of stuff because it just affects the things that I think I'm going to say at that point. I had something to say, right? Mm-hmm. I knew how to tell a Cobra Commander story that would make sense. And so hopefully that's what I did.
Yeah. And would it have been the case with just working with the editors to sort of have them as a bit of a guide rails to make sure that you're kind of keeping it kind of consistent to the essence of the characters?
Honestly, once I'm a good research person, I think I could research it a little bit, understand enough of the character to give myself the framework. No, we didn't really. In fact, it was just a matter that I wrote it. And then at that point, they looked at it to see whether or not it was in the right place. So
yeah, so it's kind of research without rereading.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're getting getting the idea, getting the information without getting the the page by page turn of rereading the original story kind of thing.
Yeah, I spent. I suppose I can compare these comics to the Captain America work I did. I did this book called Captain America: Theater of War, and each of the 4 issues that I did, I'm very proud of, right? I love those books. It's very interesting to be a British person writing what's essentially like a love letter to the American military. It talks about the greatest generation. It talks about, the plight of the common soldier in Iraq. It talks about the formation and build of the United States of America and how it became a country and where it stands, right? Certainly it did in the time. It's very different 20 years later after writing those books. But I had something to say, and I knew that I could talk about military because my family's a military family, and I knew I could talk about these things and have it mean something. Because what do you really care about? For example, when you do G.I.JOE as a cartoon, they run in with their gun and they shoot a lot of stuff, or they, laser beams fly everywhere. Everyone gets blown up. The stuff happens. That's what it's supposed to be, right? But in terms of storytelling, the way that I tell it, I only ever do heroism when people are in battle and they're scared, or people are in battle and they're thinking of their family at home. Like there are stakes in that, right? Mm-hmm. That's real heroism. Like jumping into a place and bashing everybody's heads in isn't heroism. It's basically lunacy, right? But, we get these superhero characters or superhero type characters in G.I.JOE. You can do that with them. But the way that I write, I don't need to do that with them. I want to do something different. I want to tell stories about like what soldiers are like, what it's like to be in this environment, why Cobra Commander feels the way he does. And so it's always stood me in good stead, It's why I have the career that I have,
Yeah, and incidentally, I think you were the first Brit to work on the G.I.JOE title outside of originally UK, produced UK content in Battle Action Force and Action Force from Marvel UK. So first for an American publisher.
I should do some more. I want to do some more now. Now I'm talking with you. I'm like, I should go do those again. I really liked working on G.I.JOE. I thought it was great.
Yeah, well, it's in a new home now.
Where's it now?
It's with Skybound under Robert Kirkman's imprint. And
Okay.
not too long ago, they did get another Brit to do a miniseries. They had Dan Waters doing a Destro miniseries, and yeah, he brought a good British sensibility to the title. Yeah, so was the idea that Cobra Reborn would always be a one and done for you, with another writer picking up the main series, or was there a thought that you might do more?
Yeah, at the time, I seem to remember that I was just so busy. I was so overwhelmed with work. I was getting really burned out. There was a time at Marvel when I was writing 5 books a month, and it's untenable, right? Can't do it.
Yeah.
I was feeling the weight of it. I could do it, but it was. You think really quickly, creatively, but I felt like I was starting to make mistakes in my writing because I was just trying to have to adapt really quickly and try to stay on top of things. So I didn't want to keep doing that all the time,
Yeah, it's sort of hearing other writers talk about it. I think it's something you can do for a short amount of time, but either your health, the things that you're sacrificing, or the quality of the story, something is going to give, and it's not tenable to be going at that kind of pace for too very long. Yeah. So I think that was it for Cobra Reborn and your time on Joe. And never know, in the future things come around, we might see your name in the credits of something from Skybound. Who knows? Who knows? Is there anything that you would like to promote? I know that you're flogging a dead horse over at Substack.
Flogging his back.
At the moment, so if people want to catch up with your writings and thoughts, Paul Jenkins Writer .substack.com is where you can be found for that. But is there anything else that you'd like to promote?
You just got me ahead of. There will be an announcement about a project that I'm working on. People will really care about it when it comes out. It's sort of like one of those silly. I don't really do those kind of teasers. I'm going to make an announcement next week. Here's the pre-announcement announcement. Right? Yeah, I've got something that's in the works right now that I think everyone will know about it when it happens, and when they do, I think they'll be excited about it. But I think the Substack is actually fun right now. I love the fact that I'm bringing it back. Flogging a Dead Horse was very legendary, at least to me, and. And I'm actually working on the next one today because people that follow my Facebook page know that I've got 2 Roombas. Well, one's a Roomba and the other's a Chinese knockoff. But one of them called Jeff, and Jeff is like the Chinese knockoff, and he's great. He works just great. And then I bought an actual Roomba. We call him Neil, and he's absolutely useless. Right? So there's this like ongoing saga on my Facebook page about these 2 Roombas. Neil is just a mess, right? I don't know what happened to this poor Roomba, but he's breaking apart, and he lost the back of his casing the other day. Right? He always gets stuck in the middle of the floor. He never gets back home. And Jeff just kind of tootles around and then cleans up the floor and then just goes back to his charging station every time. So I'm writing that one at the moment in Substack. Call it BattleBots.
Yes, attach some implements to the front of them and sort of set them up against each other.
See if they can have a fight in the middle of the floor, because I guarantee Jeff will win. Neil stands no chance.
That's fantastic. For our listeners, I'll just remind them that we can be found at talkingjoe.co.uk. That is our home and points to all of the places we can be found. And as always, a big thanks to all of our Patreon backers who keep the lights on for all of these expensive hosting fees that I have to pay to keep this thing running. And otherwise, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Paul, for checking in and telling us about your time on G.I. Joe and more besides. And until next time, Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast. Laters.